We are live streaming now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so thank you and welcome to this meeting of the Place Panel of the Combined Authority and Leeds City Region. I have some apologies and substitutes notified. So I have apologies from Councillor Cheetham from Barnsley, Councillor Scullion from Calderdale, who has a clashing meeting, Councillor Eyre from Wakefield, and from Mark Roberts from the Local Enterprise Partnership, and Tom Stannard from Wakefield, and Alan Rees from Combined Authority. I don't know, are there any other apologies or absences? Yes, Helen.
And Nick Hatkin from Yorkshire Housing, who's going to join me with the presentation today, but unfortunately he's not been able to, so apologies from Nick.
Thank you, Helen. We'll record that. If I can remind people where possible, if you put yourselves on mute to avoid background noises. I'll try and see raised hands on screen if they are, but if people want to use the raise hand functions, that might be easier because I can't see everybody on the screen at once. But between that and the chat and physical hands, I'm sure people will tell me if I miss anybody. So item 2 is to remind people to declare any interests you may have, either now or when the particular items come up. Item 3, I don't think there are any exempt items, so we don't need to worry about that. So item 4 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of October. Can I ask if there's any corrections or comment on those? In that case, can I take silence as assent and that we're happy that those are a correct record? Thank you, everybody. So that brings us to the first major item, which is the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership Prospectus. And I'll hand over to Helen for this.
Chair, and Dominic, if you could share your screen with the slides, please. I am going to do a Chris Whitty, as some of you heard earlier, and ask for next slide, please. So whilst Dominic's doing that, just like to thank you for the opportunity of introducing the partnership to you. The presentation that you'll see is actually in my housing association, Connect Housing's branding, because we're still formulating all of the kind of infrastructure for the partnership. We do have a brand for the partnership, we just haven't actually got all of the templates. So apologies that it's actually in Connect, but it is part of the whole partnership. This presentation is going to be very short because Rebecca did a very good summary paper in the pack, and you've already got the prospectus, and hopefully you've had a chance to read the prospectus in the pack as well. So Dominic, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So that's the kind of front page of the prospectus that you will have seen in your pack. And to just give you a little bit of information about the partnership, it's been building for the last 2 years of housing associations working in the Leeds City region initially. Very much a grassroots development, looking at what housing associations in the region want to collaborate on, what they feel they can practically collaborate on, and how we can develop a single voice. We're a pretty diverse group. We've got lots in common. So we're all not-for-profit social businesses with a strong social purpose, and we're long-term investors in the region and in our communities. I think it's called patient capital, but we are diverse. And so we've got some national housing associations such as Accent based in Bradford, some northern housing associations such as Together based in Brighouse, large regionals such as Yorkshire Housing based in Leeds, and then smaller regionals such as my housing association, that is based in Dewsbury and Leeds, and Leeds Federated and Leeds and Yorkshire, as well as specialist and local housing associations such as BME housing associations, Unity in Leeds and Manningham in Bradford, as well as larger stock transfer housing associations, WDH in Wakefield and in communities in Bradford. So it's a challenge making sure that we have a common voice and we find things that are easy to agree on. Our main drivers to the partnership are that we want a greater impact, and we know that we can have a greater impact when we work together, especially on big issues such as the climate emergency. We genuinely want to support the local authorities and the combined authority and the NHS in meeting the challenges that we face together in the region. And we want the best for the citizens of this region by maximising the investment and the impact of that investment that we can have by working together. So you can see on page 18 of the pack that just from the 10 housing associations that I've mentioned, that they've got their headquarters in West Yorkshire, we've got a turnover of 709 million in 2018-19, 92,000 homes. We're quite a significant employer in the region. And so the prospectus that you've seen has been developed by the 10 housing associations that have got HQs in the region, but we're a much broader partnership than that. We've got housing associations that work in the region but are based elsewhere, such as Johnny Johnson and 13 Group. We've now also recently had the head of service for Kirklees Housing and Leeds Housing join us as the retained stock local authorities, because we want to maximise the voice of social housing in the region, and it seemed remiss not to have two of the largest landlords in the region present around the table. And we've also got Homes England as part of the partnership. Judith and Rebecca join us every time as a representative of the combined authority. We have NHS representatives around the table, and now we're also welcoming some of the local universities as well. So Dominic, if you could give me the next slide, please. And I apologise about the typo, integrated instead of integrated. But these are the 5 ambitions that we've set out in the prospectus, which is our offer really to partners in West Yorkshire. And for each of them, we've set out what we already do, because many people don't know the range of things that housing associations get involved in, what more we want to do, and how we think that we can make that happen by working together. I won't go into the detail of all of these different ambitions because that's set out in the prospectus, but just to say that beneath each one, we're currently developing a more detailed action plan that's led by specialists from different housing associations. And at the moment, that's being supported by Mike Palin, who some of you might know. He's from GC Consulting, and he was also the chief executive of St Helens Local Authority when they were developing Leeds City Region mayoral, well, combined authority and mayoral combined authority. So he understands the challenges from all different perspectives. Our aim is to have a plan that we can share with Homes England, with the combined authority, with the mayor, and demonstrate to all partners how we can help make things happen, well, contribute to making things happen as quickly as possible, because we know that's one of the challenges that a new mayor and a combined authority will face once it's all started. Mike has been reviewing the progress of combined authorities elsewhere and compared it against the partnership that we're working with. And he thinks in terms of our partnership, we're actually quite well ahead in terms of linking health and housing, which of course in a pandemic and a post-pandemic era is quite important. And on climate emergency, we've been working really closely with James Brass from the Combined Authority, and have adopted the framework that the Combined Authority have adopted to help guide the collaboration in terms of climate emergency. On new build, we're bringing new build and regeneration together in terms of action planning, and we've been meeting with the directors of development from the local authorities and with Homes England on things like how we can help progress stalled sites and how we can help with the Brownfield fund and make sure that that investment is utilised. And Judith and Rebecca will be coming to the next meeting on the 9th of February, where we're going to talk more about the Brownfield pipeline. In terms of creating economic opportunity or connecting people to economic opportunity, we're obviously significant employers in the region, and we're good employers as well, you know, real living wage employers, etc. We've got a strong commitment to apprenticeships, and as examples in communities in Bradford, Leeds for the region, a very successful graduate employment programme, which we all buy into, which brings graduates into the housing profession. And Unity have got an enterprise hub. But most of us as housing associations have financial inclusion teams that help maximise the income of our residents and tenants to help them engage in the local economy. And that's an area we're very keen to develop more strategic alliances around that area, so that we can bring our resources to bear on that as well and achieve a greater impact. So Dominic, slide 4, please. So this is just a kind of where we're at the moment and the work we're doing. The partnership is maturing. We're strengthening our governance arrangements so that we can be agile as a representative of housing in the area. We're developing a secretariat and a more formal structure. And we're also developing links with other stakeholders, such as the CBI. We're apolitical, but we are offering to meet all of the mayoral candidates to make the case for housing with all of them and help them actually understand the role that we play in that area. And so really, finally, the key message from me is that as a partnership, we're ready and willing to help the combined authority in whichever way we can. And that's really all I wanted to say. So I'm happy to take any questions, which is the last slide, Dominic. Thank you. Or actually maybe not share the screen so that I can see people. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Helen. That's a really helpful and useful summary of what, as you said, is a very good document. Can I see, are there any questions or comments? Yes, Amir.
Thank you, Tim. Helen, yeah, I thought it was really good, and it was really good to see the work of the associations coming together in that way, and especially sort of aligning with some of the regional aspirations. I just wondered whether, given the capacity and the sort of funds that you have, whether you could do something towards leveraging up sites that are not commercially viable. And I know you make reference in your report that, you know, either the good sites people pay a lot for, and therefore you guys get priced out of them, and you get left with the challenging ones. But in places, I think in a lot of places, we've got a situation where the private sector can't follow on because the projects are just not commercially viable. Is there a way of introducing a mix within your schemes so that you're working with the private sector on schemes that are mixed, that maybe would enable a sense of place to be established through them? And by that, owner occupiers choose to buy into those places. I think once we get a situation where owner occupiers are paying market price to live in a place, that sets a new benchmark and then allows the private sector to then follow on, which would then enable so much of the redundant spaces that we've got to be released. Obviously, there's a lot of infrastructure stuff to go along with that, but I just wondered whether, to what extent your involvement and your input could be aligned towards trying to achieve that rebalancing.
Well, as individual housing associations, we do work in partnership with private sector house builders, and we've done that for a long time. I think one of the challenges is for all of us, and that's one of the things we've been talking to the directors of development about in Homes England, is on these more difficult sites, and a lot of us have got history of working in the more difficult sites because our kind of reason for being has been to help aid regeneration, but we're able to do that on a very small level usually, and on the bigger sites, that's the issue that we're trying to work with the Combined Authority, Homes England, and the local authorities to actually work out how we can work with them and the private developers to move these stall site on. It is quite complex. Judith is probably able to explain the detail of that more than I can, but it's definitely something we're willing to do and very keen to take that can-do approach. It's just being able to join all the dots together.
Thank you. Judith, do you want to add to that? Because I guess this overlaps with some of the work we're hoping to do with the Brownfield funding.
It does indeed, and this is building on a number of strands, really. It's building on the strand with Helen and the HA sector. It's also building on some work that we're doing with Homes England in terms of working towards an action plan with them, where we are working towards a single pipeline across our region. And then we will be working with both Homes England, our HA partners who have got stock and have got a significant stake in some of our communities, and work with some of the sites that we know are stubbornly stalled, finding routes that we can bring them forward. And that will be a combination, that'll be a blend really, in terms of how we can work with private sector partners who are willing to work with us and share a similar a set of values and are in it for a longer term stake, but also, as I say, working with other partners who have got the kind of financial tools whereby we can begin to be a bit more proactive within markets that are much more challenging. So we're looking at all of that, and I can talk to you a bit more, Amir, out of meeting in terms of how we're doing that in a bit more detail, if that helps.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments from yes, Helen Featherstone? Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, you might be thinking of this already, but just a comment really, in that it seems to be quite an exciting opportunity because you're all coming together to think about how you're creating uniqueness and identity, as well as being able to work at scale and creating, improving place, but how you're creating sense of place, I guess, within that. And having worked with several housing authorities in the past, Kirklees and Broadacres in North Yorkshire and a couple over in the Northwest, it'd be really interesting to see how you might use public art within your strategies to help to achieve that, whether that be using sculpture as traffic calming measures, designs of gateways, entrance features, all manner of things. It just seems a really interesting opportunity working at this scale to start that thinking from the beginning and to have those embedded into the schemes from the start, which always makes a massive difference when then the residents can be brought in to include their voices within those programmes. So I just wondered if there was any thinking about that, or is that something that you'd be open to?
It's definitely something we'd be open to. I don't think at this stage we've put a huge amount of thought as a partnership into that. It's certainly something that a number of us are involved on the town boards for the town funding, and certainly my association's involved in Dewsbury, and I know that part of the strategy for Dewsbury is to do exactly that, is to introduce public art, etc. So it's definitely something we would all be open for, and on an individual basis, individual housing associations will have done that and have done that on schemes. But it's as a partnership, that's not something we've brought through yet.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, so thank you very much for the presentation. Oh, sorry, Andrew, yes.
Could I just ask, I'm really interested in what you've said and in building these partnerships across many businesses that previously thought themselves to be competitors with each other. You face challenges and great opportunities. Is it actually working in terms of building houses, or is that where people say, well, actually, this is my site and I'll do this one? I mean, I can understand it. The easy, low-hanging fruit is probably establishing common denominators, common approach, common standards. But when you actually come to, right, we want to get building, are you managing to find opportunities to work together collectively to do things you couldn't do before?
Well, historically, we've actually got a reasonably strong track record of developing sites jointly. So my associations develop sites jointly with Unity, with Leeds Federated, with Yorkshire Housing. So we have actually got a track record. But yes, that is one of the things that we want to increase as part of the partnership activity. There are some technical issues and difficulties around the strategic partnership model that's with Homes England, that's why we've got Homes England around the table talking to them about how we can actually facilitate this, particularly for the smaller housing associations to be part of larger schemes that we as smaller housing associations can't deliver on our own. So absolutely, that's something that we want to make sure that we continue to develop, because we do have a track record of having done that in the past.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Andrew. It's a good point. Okay, so I'm really not seeing any more now. So we've talked before about you know, the advantage of having a cooperative partnership with the housing associations, and this seems to very much build on that. And clearly, the 5 ambitions there fit in well with our ambitions and priorities as an area. So I take it we're happy to you know, to recognise the work and welcome it, and encourage officers to continue to work forward on this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Item 6 is the place narrative, which we've had we've had on our agenda a couple of times before. We now have the final draft of this before us. I'll ask Alison to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping Michael Long on the call is going to share some slides for you. I'm assuming that the place narrative document is now familiar to most of you. So just to recap, it was a priority that the panel agreed through your initial workshops when the panel was established, and we've been actively working with you on it now for over a year, and we went through a period of engagement in autumn that concluded on the 20th of November. So today I'm just going to provide you with a brief summary of the feedback that we received, and also talk through some of the changes that we've made to the document as a result of that feedback. So we engaged with yourselves as panel members and with officers in the local authorities, as well as internally in the combined authority officers, where the content was relevant to them also. So we're also obviously today seeking your endorsement of this final draft to go to the combined authority, subject to your views. So if I could have the next slide, please. So the first couple of slides are just to recap on the purpose of the narrative. So I think it is probably fair to say that we have struggled collectively with the brief. We've thrown around at these meetings before the sort of purpose of the document, but the slide here are the aspirations that we had for the document. So bringing our spatial priorities together in one place, describing our places and how they interact, explaining the key layers on the Leeds City Region infrastructure map, which is a tool we developed some years ago now, providing a home for information relating to our strategic priority areas, which are an agreed set of priorities in West Yorkshire. So those were the refreshed version of those were approved by the combined authority in December last year. And then importantly, it doesn't aim to categorise all places, but it is aiming to help tell the story of our city region and our ambition. Next slide, please. This one just sets out how the document fits. So it's important that the place narrative complements our existing and emerging plans and strategies, both locally and at a sub-regional level. At a sub-regional level, it will form part of our strategic economic framework, which is our suite of policies and strategy documents that will replace the SEP. So it's not new policy, its focus is on presenting our existing challenges and priorities spatially, and signposting other key strategy documents and our existing investment programmes. Next slide, please. So moving on to the feedback that we received. So we received over 150 individual comments. So that's been really helpful. A lot of the comments from officers, as you would expect, focused on the detail of the document and how it aligned with local policy and strategy. So there have been many changes and tweaks made at the request of local authority officers. Responses from yourselves were much more strategic. So that was also really valuable. So thank you for taking the time to review it and provide your comments. The slide here are some of the positive comments that we received. I think that they acknowledge that it is a complex story that we're trying to tell here, and suggest that the tool we've used does help to make the content accessible. At the scoping stages, you as a panel did acknowledge that part of the role of the document is to communicate the complexity of what we're trying to achieve for our places. So I think that's probably reflected in the feedback. Next slide, please. So we also, as you would expect, received loads of useful suggestions for additional content or changes to the draft document. I've picked out some headlines on this slide. So it was felt that the document should express a sense of place more clearly, bring out regional distinction and the role that culture plays. The diversity of people who live in the region could come through more strongly. It was suggested that the challenges of an ageing population, homelessness and issues relating to young people weren't picked up particularly. And there was a suggestion we could add additional content on affordable homes. And on inclusive growth, there was a suggestion that we needed to refer to asset-based community development, which is part of the thinking that is embedded in our inclusive growth framework. We were also asked to be clear why we're drawing attention to where ethnic minorities are concentrated in that section of the document. There was a suggestion that the productivity challenge should be included, and that we needed a more people-focused description of the issues relating to employment opportunities. So they're all great comments, and I'll talk you through some of the changes that we've made to try and address some of those in a moment. Just before I do this slide, we also received feedback that was more related to the purpose and the scope of the document, and I think it will be helpful to reflect on these together. So I think that these comments are really helpful in reconfirming the purpose of this document and the limitations of it, if you like. So we had some comments suggesting that key headlines and messages could be drawn out. We had a comment around considering the so what question in the challenge section. So we're presenting lots of evidence without drawing that many conclusions. And then we also had comments relating to the absence of a methodology to resolve the issues that we're raising, or how to prioritise investment. So in response, my thoughts in response to those issues are that, I mean, we are working on an executive summary that will try and draw out some of the key headlines, but so that might help. But I think the issue is that it's not an easy thing to do, and that the headlines that you would draw from the document would be different for different audiences. And so I think these questions probably reconfirm that the purpose of the document is about providing a common evidence base that can be drawn on for other pieces of work. And to give an example of that, the connectivity plan, which was launched yesterday, takes some of its information from this narrative, but it only takes those bits that are obviously relevant to that agenda. And then on the other points, again, I think they're helpful in confirming what the narrative does. So it's not the job of this document to set out future policies or investments that will help address the challenges. It does set out our current spatial investment priorities, but I think it's the work of the panel, the other panels, the combined authority and the LEP boards to steer the policies and investments that come forward in a way that help tackle these challenges. All this document can do is build a common understanding of those challenges and provide supporting evidence. So that's my reflections on those issues, but obviously I'd welcome the panel's views at the end of the presentation on those issues. So if I could just have the next slide, please. So I'll just quickly talk you through some of the changes that we've made. You may have had the opportunity to review it again. The link to the document was in the papers. So it looks broadly similar, but there's been some content changes. So these slides are the executive summary that we're currently working on, and as it follows the 4 sections of the narrative, I'm just going to use those to talk you through some of the changes. So in the introduction of the narrative, we've added a line to say who the document is targeted at. That's included on the slide there, and one on the purpose of the document. So your views on whether those are helpful are welcome. We've also added, which isn't on the slide, a chunky paragraph on the COVID-19 pandemic, because we received quite a lot of comments about how we were positioning it with regard to the pandemic. There's also a link to the economic recovery plan right up front in that document. Adjustments have also been made to make it clearer that this document covers West Yorkshire and its wider city region. So we've added the West Yorkshire and the Leeds city region boundary to all of the maps as you read through the document. So the next slide, please. So the places section. In this section, we've added more references to different backgrounds and cultural festivals. We've added several references to culture throughout the document, including references to the SME creative sector. We've worked with our district partners to try and integrate additional content into the asset maps, and we have included some additional images that are people focused. We hope that those changes go some way towards addressing the comments around distinctiveness and culture, but again, we are happy to continue to work on the content if there are specific suggestions about how we can continue to develop that. If you could move on to the challenges, thank you. So the challenges section, we've retained a structure here and the level of detail, and that's based on your previous feedback that this is a technical document and you did welcome the inclusion of evidence in there. We have added some additional content, but it's aligned to the 6 challenges. We tried not to divert from those, just to keep the document manageable. So 4 of the key changes that we've made. So with regard to ethnicity, we have added a line to make it clear as to why we're including that content. So the line states that it's of concern to us that residents from Black, Asian or minority ethnic groups are more likely than white residents to live in areas of high deprivation in the region. So we're hoping that that line clarifies why that content has been included. Additional content's also been added on inclusive growth, and there's a link in there to the inclusive growth framework now, which is in the public domain as a emerging draft. The productivity challenge, there's been a paragraph added to provide additional information on that, and we've added additional information on social housing as well. Some of the things we haven't added, so we were asked about an ageing population, homelessness and young people. There is a reference to an ageing population in there, which is in the context of climate change and vulnerability, but we haven't added any additional content on any of these issues. So there's a number of reasons for that. In some cases we lack the data or the evidence on the issues, and there wasn't a clear that it wasn't obvious that there was a spatial dimension to some of the issues, or how we align it to the 6 issues that we've structured the document around in this section. But we did reflect that all of those issues that had been raised aligned with housing, and we hope that the housing strategy that we will be working on over the next year can start to touch on some of those issues. But again, if there are suggestions about how we do weave additional content in, please do raise that. So finally, if I could just have the next slide, please. The investment section. There've been a number of changes to this section, mainly with in response to internal feedback. So it's been restructured to avoid a programme by programme narrative. It was felt that that underplayed the place-based approach that we do take to investment. So it's now been structured under the headings of connectivity, resilience, regeneration, and spatial priority areas, which are more forward-looking. So it also includes now at the start of that section a map that has typology of places on it. So that's a map that's been developed for the connectivity plan, which I mentioned was launched yesterday. Colleagues and I were involved in producing that map and aligning those typologies to local plans. And again, we felt including that at the beginning of this section helps to show that we're taking a place-based approach to our investment programmes, which are based on an understanding of the role of places. So again, any reflections on the changes to that section would be welcome. So just a final slide, please. So just to say really that that's a summary of the changes that have been made. If you've had a chance to look at it, there is obviously many changes that have been made from officer feedback, and thank you for your support in helping to shape it so far. In terms of next steps, we do intend that this document can be updated as new evidence emerges, and that as new programmes come on stream, we can add additional content. But for now, we're seeking endorsement and recommendation to take it to the combined authority for approval as part of the strategic economic framework. So that's it from me. I'd welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alison. Are we okay if we take the, yeah, we have done, take the slides down so it's easier to see. So can I invite any questions or comments on this? Sorry, I'm struggling to see anybody on the screen at the moment. Helen, were you indicating? No. No. Sorry, yes, yeah.
I'll say, I think it brings it to life much better than it was before. I really enjoyed looking through this, and I think that it just had a much better sense of the, you know, the special things in our region, which weren't necessarily there before. It was a bit bland, and so yeah. So I think you've done a great job.
Thank you, Andrew.
I'd just like to say this document has come on so far from our discussions last summer. I think it's you should be congratulated, Alison, and all the people you've worked with to bring it this far. It's a very complicated challenge you've set yourself in trying to address so many issues. And I think half the battle is to make clear what you're trying to do and what you're not trying to do, which you've taken considerable steps to achieve. So I congratulate you on your work, and absolutely this must be constantly updated, or all your work will sit in a file and never be looked at again, because the stuff's changing all the time. It's got to be a live document.
Thank you. Peter.
I agree, Alison's done a great job, but essentially this is a bureaucratic document. There is no real genuine sense of involving representatives throughout the districts or involving the public. This is bureaucrats' document endorsed by a few councillors, and that's what it is. Now let's not kid ourselves. I think Alison's done a great job trying to reflect the views of the different local authorities as their processes genuinely try to involve the public. But beyond that, it's very difficult to see where the public and how the public are being involved in this process.
Thanks, Peter. Any more comments? Alison, do you want to come back on any of those? Or coming in.
Just to say, thanks for your comments. I think with regard to the issue around public engagement, because it's not new policy or new strategy, it's setting out current challenges and signposting of the documents. It was never our intention to undertake a public engagement process with this document. I think that would be what would have followed or that is what does follow as we build our strategies and investment programs going forward. And again, to use the example of the connectivity plan, which was launched yesterday, that's been launched for a public engagement exercise. So I think that explains why we haven't gone down that process, but I acknowledge the comments, and it might be something we want to think about in advance of taking it to combined authority.
Thanks, Alison. I don't know if there are any further thoughts on that. Yeah, Lisa. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of consistency, in the section on environments where it references the Combined Authority's declaration of a climate emergency, I think it should also reference the local authorities' own declarations as well, because we've got different deadlines for some of them.
Yeah, thank you. That's noted. We can do that. That actually did come back through the feedback, and we are in the process of trying to articulate it. But there was a question on Leeds' target and whether it had changed. So we'll look at resolving that again before it goes to combined authority.
That's it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think the issue Peter raised about engagement, I think. Might be interesting for Ben perhaps to reflect on that one more widely. I think there's always a challenge of doing things at West Yorkshire of what do you engage on, which doesn't simply involve having the same conversations that local authorities are having, but equally, how do we make sure that what we're doing reflects what the local authorities are saying rather than, what the local communities are saying rather than just what the authorities are saying.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's a good challenge, although I would return back to the comment that Alison made about the document, in that it's intended very much to bring together kind of strands of work and pieces of analysis that would otherwise be unconnected, and to give a kind of joint narrative, not just for the organisation, for the Combined Authority, but for then partners to draw upon as well. I don't think it was kind of ever intended as something that we would be presenting as a piece of kind of groundbreaking new policy, because that isn't what it is. I would echo the points. I think Alice has done a great job at getting it this far over the last months. And I very much see it as a platform from which we can build. And I think it will be excellent if actually we can bring more community voice into that, but I think that has to reflect the kind of application and the results of some of the interventions that we will be making, rather than kind of talking about them in advance. So I very much see this as a live document, and we absolutely can paint some of that context into any presentation we take to the CA on the left.
Thanks. I think that'd be helpful, Ben. Sorry, I think I'm getting some echo from your microphone, I'm afraid. Can you? Thanks. Okay. So with those comments and that proviso around our understanding of the role of engagement in that, we're happy to see this move on to the next stage of the process and take that forward. Are there any dissent from that? And thank you again. Adding thanks to everybody who's contributed comments in between to this as well, and thank you, Alison and the team, for the work done on it. Okay, bear with me whilst I find the item. So item 7 is the housing pipeline refresh report, and I think this is Rebecca to present this.
Thank you, Chair. We're bringing this item today to give you an update on the strategic housing pipeline, predominantly, and some of the work we've been doing with local authority officers to develop that over the last 18 months or so. And then also importantly, to demonstrate the links that has across to the revenue funding that we secured through the devolution deal, and also the Brownfield Housing Fund, and where we're up to with those two pieces of work. Before I go into the report, one thing I would like to say is that this is a really evolving piece of work, and across both these programmes, we're working across all the office teams to develop these programmes, but we felt that this is the right time to bring to you an update with where we're at this meeting. So if I can start with the strategic housing pipeline, when that was first developed, that was brought to Place Panel for endorsement in October 2018. Since then, it's obviously recognised that housing sites and schemes across the region and across districts are very fluid and chop and change a lot in terms of their deliverability, their allocations. Local plans are obviously often changing, etc. So it's an evolving pipeline and very much a live tool. So we don't bring this on separate occasions for the panel to approve what's on the pipeline, because it's recognised that changes very regularly. So what we're searching for today is endorsement of the current approach we're taking to using that pipeline across the programmes that we've got. So the pipeline that is attached at the appendix is the current one, which we've been working with districts to develop, which currently has 75 schemes on there with the capacity to deliver 37,000 homes. With the pipeline, it's a very broad range of projects. How they enter the pipeline, I've described in 2.7 of the report, is predominantly against their strategic fit with the strategic economic framework objectives. So we've developed a scorecard quite recently alongside districts, which puts a ranking against inclusive growth, supporting clean growth, delivering 21st century transport and boosting productivity, which then assesses the suitability of sites to come onto the pipeline. So local authorities will propose sites, and then we'll work with them to apply the scorecard as to whether they are a high strategic fit with the regional objectives. So that's how the sites enter it. And again, they may come off the pipeline if sites then move into a delivery stage, or if perhaps their circumstances change and they're no longer suitable for housing. So we're asking you to kind of endorse that approach that we've taken to developing the pipeline. In terms of how it links to the revenue fund and the Brownfield fund, if I start with the housing pipeline revenue fund, we used the pipeline to help secure that funding when we were negotiating with MHCLG. So the revenue fund is predominantly there to support the development of the pipeline. One of the things that we've identified through working with districts is that there is a clear need to boost capacity at regional and local level to develop that pipeline in terms of resource. We're working through what that will look like over the next 12 months that we've got this funding. But that is one of the key areas where we want to try and boost some capacity to develop the pipeline. We do recognise that the money that we've got in the revenue pot won't stretch across the whole pipeline, which is part of the reason why we're working through an ongoing prioritisation exercise as to how we can best target that funding, both at schemes that can deliver and can deliver new and good quality housing, but also at those schemes that we know are transformational and can have a huge impact on communities. And so how we can best apply that funding to meet the objectives of the organisation, but also make sure that we're actually delivering. On the pipeline revenue fund, the first 250,000 has now been received and allocated. So we did a piece of work through last year to identify some of the projects that could accelerate more quickly, and where districts already have consultancy, for example, on board to take things forward. So we've worked with the councils to allocate that funding. And in some respects, it's gone to boosting capacity or to doing some investigative work to move forward to get schemes ready to enter capital programmes. With the 2.95 million that will be released in April, that's where we're still doing a lot of further work to prioritise that pipeline and to look at the capacity that is needed to move that pipeline forward. And that's the part that's still very much live, ongoing work as to how we allocate that. So we've got a few suggestions in 2.11 of the report as to some of the 3 bullet points, the key areas that we'll be looking to spend that funding at quite a high level at the moment. And we're planning to have more of a more well-developed programme to hopefully take to investment committee as a report as to how that programme will take shape. The intention is to try and take that on the 4th of March, but because there's a lot of work to do, and that's an indicative programme, and it might be the meeting after that it goes in for. Then finally, just on how that links across to the Brownfield Housing Fund, which is obviously the £67 million capital programme. We are keen to support the strategic priorities, and we're doing a lot of current work with the districts to identify which of the sites on the pipeline are suitable for the Brownfield Housing Fund. However, it's recognised that a number of the sites are long-term strategic sites, and 2 of the conditions of the Brownfield Housing Fund mean that it can be challenging to deliver some of those larger sites within the parameters of the fund. So the first one being that houses must start on site by March 2025, and the second being that the 67 million has to deliver a minimum of 4,500 homes. So with these, we're sifting at the moment with officers which of the sites on the pipeline could firstly deliver by March 2025, but secondly could meet that target of 4,500 homes. So across the programme, what the sort of rate of intervention would need to be for projects to come in, and that, again, that's very live, ongoing work at the moment. So we're going through the first sift, and then the final part on the Brownfield Housing Fund is because of some of those issues. It is recognised that the full 4,500 homes through the Brownfield Fund may not be able to fully be achieved through just the strategic housing pipeline alone because of the complex nature of a lot of the sites. So it is proposed that we will be looking to go out for a call for projects in the next few weeks after we've identified those sites from the pipeline that we can take forward to look at making sure that we're fulfilling the obligations of the Brownfield Housing Fund and able to maximise the number of good quality homes that we can get through the Brownfield Housing Fund. And again, we're developing the criteria at the moment for that call for projects. So the report is looking for endorsement of the approach to developing the housing pipeline and the refreshed approach that we're taking, and also to that indicative kind of outline approach to applying the revenue fund in particular, but also happy to take any comments on the way things are moving with Brownfield Housing Fund as well. So we've got Judith and Kate Thompson, who leads up Brownfield Housing Fund, on the call as well. So if members have any questions between the 3 of us, we'd be happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So it's obviously excellent that we've got these allocations, and encouraging that you're indicating that it was the fact that we started to develop the pipeline that in turn has helped us to secure the funding to take it forward. Obviously, there's a bit of a concern that the pressures on both timeline and numbers might mean that we end up going for the easier wins and still leave problems with there. But I guess that pressure is always going to be there. Can I see, are there any questions or comments on this from colleagues? Not seeing anything at the moment. Judith or Kate, did you have anything you wanted to add to what Rebecca said?
If I could just add, Rebecca and colleagues within the delivery team have been doing a huge amount of work with our district colleagues, and thanks to our district colleagues for their time. The pipeline has been a key piece of work in terms of making sure that our discussions through DEVO, that the pipeline was an evidence base in itself, that we have a significant amount of sites across our region that do need intervention and that can actually provide new homes. The majority are going to be on brownfield, and those are the ones where we're probably going to be focusing a lot of resource and a lot of time in terms of the revenue funding. But I think this is a key moment for us. We've now got revenue funding that we can apply to that pipeline. We can begin to build capacity across both at a local level and a regional level, and really get into some of the detail in terms of deliverability of these sites. And work with those delivery partners who are willing to work with us and share similar values and have that longer term view. So I think this is a key piece of work for us, and certainly would welcome any comments from members, and certainly again thanks to our district partners for their time against this piece of work as well.
Thank you. I mean, I'm getting the message that people are reasonably content with this. I suppose the upside of what I said about the pressures to identify sites quickly is that in terms of the capacity building, helping any authorities deliver on sites in the brownfield, so will help to increase expertise and improve the likelihood of us being able to then move on and deliver some of the more challenging sites. So that's potentially a win as well. So if I'm not seeing any other comments, can we take that we're happy to agree that approach, and note that this will now go through the Combined Authority and the Investment Committee for sign-off, and thank you again for the work on that. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let's go back to my agenda. So item 8 is a report on green infrastructure trial and framework that's being developed by Natural England, and I think we've got Ambrose White in the meeting to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're involved in a national trial to support Natural England in their development of a national set of standards, or a framework of standards for green infrastructure. That was a commitment in the government's 25-year environment plan. We're one of 10 trial areas around England, and as part of that we've got early sight of a draft document that Natural England have produced, and we've got the chance to shape it through testing and review. So I've appended an overview of the draft document with the report to give the panel an idea of the content. There is also a parallel work stream to develop a national data set, GIS-based data set, and in future potentially an online mapping portal that Natural England will launch, so that green infrastructure data is publicly available and viewable. We've developed an informal steering group made up of officers from local authorities, from land use planning side, nature conservation, green space and open space, as well as local nature partnership members. And the steering group's been a useful way to bring people together from different disciplines that have involvement with green infrastructure, because it spreads across different service areas. And we've used the group to disseminate the information and to collate feedback on the draft standards, as well as a useful discussion point to discuss some of the principles around green infrastructure. And as we have a variety of different authorities in the Leeds City region, that's quite useful to bring out the different positions of different authorities. So in terms of the report, we're seeking panel's comments on 2 feedback forms. There's an online survey that we will need to respond to as part of our participation in the trial. And I should have added, this is part of our devolution deal, our participation in this trial. So we do need to play our role and provide that feedback. We have had really good feedback from all the partners involved, and we're seeking your comments. There's 2 separate surveys, one for the mapping and one for the standards framework.
Okay, thanks very much, Ambrose, if anybody's had a glance at the surveys. But are there any comments or feedback? Yeah, Lisa, yeah.
There's a question actually, Chair, if that's okay. What's the deadline you're expecting for responses? Because I think most of us would probably want to go back and engage with our own kind of committees locally in terms of responding and getting wider member input?
So the survey won't be, we've only got 2 weeks to respond to the survey, which hasn't actually been launched yet. We're doing this kind of ahead of getting the survey format. We have developed the response with heads of planning, local nature partnership, the West Yorkshire Ecologist Group, but I think I'm going to need responses or comments by 5th of February at the latest in order to meet Natural England's deadline. This has also gone to Green Economy Panel, I should say, with the same deadline.
Thanks, Ambrose. Did you want to come back, Lisa?
Yeah, I'm just wondering when it went to Green Economy Panel.
The Green Economy Panel meeting got rescheduled, but it got issued via email. I think it was last week. Just checking. So it went offline.
Okay, so members basically have a week to reply.
A week from today, yeah, depending on whether anyone's had a chance to review it prior to this meeting. The proposal is to respond to this in line with our consultation process. So I understand that would involve the chairs of the panels signing off a final response.
Thanks. I guess there's a danger of something like this sounding really kind of quite technical, Ambrose. I mean, could you sort of just sum up in a couple of sentences why it's important to us, really, and what we can gain from being part of the trial?
Yeah, sure. I think the key advantages now we know what the content is, that we have some early sight of what these draft standards might be, and that we can help shape them. They're not planned to be launched until 2022, and this is the first phase of testing. There may be another round of testing with another group of local authorities around the country. So it is quite early involvement. I think one of the elements of the work that we're doing in the West Yorkshire trial is to use the draft standards to review our existing green and blue infrastructure strategy. And I think the standards framework is useful in that it provides a self-assessment and checklist for developing GI strategy. In terms of practical application for local partners, it's perhaps more limited depending on where each partner is in developing their own local strategy. And the trial period is really quite limited. It really started in earnest in about October, November, and really by the end of this month, Natural England are expecting work to have wrapped up. So there has, I think they recognise that there's been really quite a limited window for practical applications, but beyond this trial and our involvement, we can continue to use the national data set if it helps us in planning for green infrastructure investment as well as local policy. But I think it's that early sight and ability to kind of shape the direction of it. And that's what the response, I think, focuses on, the draft response.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no other comments from people at the moment. Sorry, Helen, yes.
Yeah, I just want to say, I thought this was a really interesting piece of work, and I think, obviously it's fantastic that Natural England are trying to develop these this framework, and clearly it seemed to be quite a bureaucratic and complex process to work through. My observation was really about the practical application in that, and also the public engagement in it at the kind of the outcomes end, because policy is shifting rapidly in this area, and kind of rightly so, but I don't think that necessarily people are equipped on the ground to deliver, and that people's, in terms of the public's education, awareness, willingness, is also quite up to speed with where the policy's at the moment. So that was my observation, really. There seemed to be a bit of a disconnect.
Thanks, Helen. Peter?
I just wonder about member involvement. I mean, I've not heard much of this at the local level. I think it's been an officer engagement. I'd just be interested in my other district colleagues to explore to what extent they were aware of this fully and what other members were aware of.
Lisa?
Is that for me to come back on? Sorry.
Well, shall I bring Lisa in first and then come back to you, Ambrose? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm basically echoing Peter's comments in terms of the way in which members at local areas have been involved in this, and I think an opportunity has been missed. For instance, in Leeds, it would have been sensible for us to have discussed this either at Development Plans Panel or at our Climate Emergency Advisory Committee, which is across the party in both cases, and would have engaged across the board. I think it would have been very helpful to have had that level of engagement locally to feed in. And the opportunity has been missed, basically, by arriving with such short notice.
Peter, is that agreeing or wanting to come back?
No, I'm certainly agreeing with what Lisa said. It seems to me all these reports, we got a report from officers, and there's been an engagement between officers, but very rarely significantly in any way involving members. So one wonders, is it just a bureaucratic arrangement, or what is it more?
Okay, so I mean that's it's a fair comment, but it's probably one we need to take back slightly, both to leaders and to individual authorities. I mean, some of the issues around here, particularly around planning, are quite technical, and it's understandable officers talk first to planning officers. I suppose the question is where should the awareness happen to say this is something that members might be interested in, or should be consulted about, rather than simply being dealt. Whether that's down to the combined authority to pick that up, or whether that should be picked up by our own officers. I suspect it probably needs to be a combination of the two, but I'm quite happy to sort of take that away and have a bit of more conversation with the officers to support this this panel about how we pick that one up. Then, I mean, I guess this can still be we still ask for this to be shared with interested partners locally, but obviously it's probably going to be a little bit late for the formal consultation, but probably still something that our members would want to know is going on, I suspect. Would that be helpful, Peter, for going forward?
Well, it's a start, but one would have presumed the dialogue and discussion is between local authorities. The local authorities are made up of elected members, not a series of bureaucrats. It seems to me it's endemic in this arrangement that all the dialogue is with officers.
Okay, I think we've made that point. We'll take that back and pick up on it. Ben, do you want to add anything on that?
Chair, I will, thank you. Well, just to say, we'll take this away and think about how we engage, because Peter's right in that we do engage across authorities and wider partners as well, and we can build in stages by which those authorities engage with their members. But I guess from our perspective, this is the point. This panel is the point at which we're engaging at the combined authority level with our with the members that we serve. So we need to think. I mean, and I'll take it away. We need to think about how we can get members involved earlier in the process.
Thanks, Ben. So, in terms of this specific item, we are where we are. Is there anything else people want to add? And obviously noting opportunity still to feed any further comments back over the next week or so. and via the Green Panel as well.
Chair, can I just echo Ambrose's comment that having kind of got this level of engagement, the deadline of a week shouldn't be seen too literally. And I think if we've got important things to say thereafter, then we still need to feed those in. That, as Ambrose says, that dialogue will continue, and this is very much a kind of early stage in the process. So if members can bear that in mind, we will have more opportunity on this one, I suspect.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Ambrose, anything else to add?
No, just to reiterate what Ben said, although Natural England have got a feedback process on a trial, I think they will be open to further feedback, and we've made the point that with the length of the trial being so short, we may, partners collectively will probably garner more experience and have more things to say. So we hope definitely to be able to provide feedback to Natural England, perhaps later in the year when we've got that greater experience of using the framework.
Okay, thanks very much, Ambrose. If there's nothing else on that, can we note the report and where we are on that one? Thank you. Item 9, enterprise zones and commercial sites. Kate.
Thank you, Chair. So this report on the enterprise zones and commercial sites is an update report for the panel on the progress of the Leeds City Region Enterprise Zone programme. Members of the panel may recall that the Enterprise Zone programme is made up of 2 phases, including 10 sites. So first phase was Leeds Aire Valley Enterprise Zone, and the second phase, 9 sites across West Yorkshire, excluding Leeds, across the M60 corridor loosely, and the A1, and that's known as the M62 corridor enterprise zone. So this update is primarily on phase 2 and updates members in respect of the £20 million worth of local growth fund, which we received to develop the enterprise zones further, and to inform members that we're currently on track to spend that full allocation by the deadline of 31st of March this year. So in terms of progress, 5 of the 10 sites are on site, with some close to completion. So Linley Moor West in Kirklees has now completed. Support has been flexible from the programme and has ranged from anything from nothing required, such as Linley Moor West, to informal advice, linking up on marketing and inward investment at Moor Park, to financial support for site investigations and business case development to understand any constraints to development, and also funding construction where there's been a clear viability gap and a case can be made. We've also had our first land acquisition at Langthwaite in Wakefield, and are taking forward some direct development on that site, as well as working in partnership at Parry Lane in Bradford with the council there. So in the next financial year, our initial focus will be on Parry Lane and Langthwaite, where we've successfully secured Getting Building Fund of just over 9 million to take forward the enabling works to bring forward development platforms on those sites. But in terms of the rest of the programme, that will continue, and there is a new commercial pipeline that we're expecting to emerge over the course of the next financial year, which will be the results of a recent commission that Alison and Michael and other policy colleagues have been working on, and we'll start to evaluate shortly. And in the next few weeks, we hope there'll be a report coming forward on that. So this new commercial pipeline should start to emerge from that piece of work, and will also complement work that's underway on a new commercial investment fund, which will go forward to the combined authority in the next few months. It's intended that the residual EZ sites, whether they be the whole site or some remaining parcels of land on sites which are already in delivery, will form part of that new commercial pipeline. In terms of new funding streams, we will be looking very proactively at any information that comes following the comprehensive spending review, which offers an opportunity to take forward these sites. For example, the Levelling Up Fund, the Shared Prosperity Fund, we're hoping for details to be released by government this spring on how to access those fundings, the full details and the timelines for those. So we continue to work with partners, and we're also noting in the report that the forthcoming MCA status will offer the organisation a range of new tools to help support the future development of commercial and employment space, such as mayoral development corporations, or where this is required, compulsory purchase powers. So in terms of the request to the panel, is to note the progress on the Enterprise Zone programme, note the contents of the report, and to provide any comments.
Thanks very much, Kate. So I'll open that up for questions and comments initially. Not picking any up at the moment. So I guess the new sort of commercial pipeline that you're talking about coming forward, I guess given the discussions we just had on previous two items, you might want to think a bit more about how the district, how the local authority engagement in that is going to work, and how we make sure the partner there, it perhaps ties in with the comments Ben just made earlier. So perhaps we can have a think about that for going forwards. Andrew.
It's just a quick question. Do we know who's taking 2 million square foot at East Lead at Aire Valley?
I believe we don't currently. It's not been publicly announced.
Ollie, it's a big shed, that.
It certainly is.
Okay, if there are no more comments on that one, are we?
Ben was trying to indicate Tim, wasn't he?
Was he? Oh, okay, Ben, sorry.
well, I mean, only to come back on your point, Chair, I think it is an opportunity to look at how we strengthen the partnership working. I would say that it's already fairly strong in this regard, but I think just to add to what Kate has said, kind of current indications from government are that local authorities would be the primary recipients of Shared Prosperity Fund and Levelling Up Fund, and it could be therefore that it's a different kind of partnership, one that is much more led by the local schemes, and then we can consider, what's the best way to find synergies and efficiencies looking across West Yorkshire in that context. So, but we wait with interest to both the budget and the details of these schemes as Kate set out.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, could raise some interesting challenges in terms of prioritisation and scale of some of these sites if the funding's allocated through local authorities, and sometimes for sites that perhaps have a wider strategic significance. But I guess, as you say, we need to wait and see what comes out of the budget on that one, and obviously thinking partly of Clifton in that context. Okay, if there are no other questions or comments on that, can we note that and approve the recommendations? And let me find my agenda because I've just lost it. So I think that's the final item on the agenda. So thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions, and stay safe, and we'll see you at the next meeting, if not before. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.